So the problem with roasting a turkey whole or attacking it whole is you have two completely separate different parts of the bird. You have the leg and thigh portion, and you have the breast. And you notice that with this whole turkey, it comes in a tight ball. It's just trussed up. It has that metal trussing pin at the front holding the legs together. And this actually leads to uneven cooking. There's a lot of skin that is down in between where the leg and thigh is up against the breast that will never brown. It's just going to steam. So my first step is I'm going to remove this trussing pin, and it's kind of tough. So I just have my sharpening steel. I'm just prying it out to remove it. And once I loosen, now I can take the turkey and break it down. So yes, I am not a fan of whole roasting the turkey. Now you want to remove the neck, which is stuffed inside the cavity in the bottom, and that will be great for your stock. And then at the front of the cavity, you're going to have a little bag of giblets, which you can chop up and use for your stuffing or your gravy. Pat the turkey dry, so that way it's going to be easier to handle. And now we're going to start to break it down. Now, if you watch my other videos on breaking down whole chicken and duck, it's pretty much the same thing. A bird is a bird. Bird's the word, right? So the only problem with the turkey is they're stiff and they're big. So they're a little bit harder to handle. So you got to kind of manhandle them. But here I'm just going to remove the wings by flexing it forward and running my knife into the joint. So you shouldn't actually, if you're hitting a bone and you're having a hard time pushing through, then you've missed that joint. So again, I'm going to flex that wing forward. I'm just going to make small cuts so I can see that joint. And once I expose that joint, see how I'm kind of flexing that wing? I'm popping that joint out of socket. And that's going to allow me to get my knife in between the wing joint and the actual breast and remove it cleanly. I'm going to set those aside for later. Now, next I'm going to remove the legs, but you can see how stiff that turkey is. That's because the turkey is trussed, frozen, and then shipped frozen, so it's used to being in that position. So you got to kind of loosen it up a little bit, wiggle the legs around, and then make sure that the breast is fully covered by the skin before you move on to the next step, which is removing the legs. So see how I'm kind of pressing that skin down in that crease between the breast and the legs? This is going to give me a clear guideline to make my initial cut with my knife. So then later on when we roast our turkey breast, we have full skin coverage. So once I have that guideline, I'm going to get closest to the leg side. Again, I'm just making sure that I have skin covering that breast. I'm going to make a little cut just to cut through that skin portion and separate the leg from the breast. And I'm going to pop out a joint. Now again, on the other side, I'm just making sure that that breast is fully covered with the skin, finding that crease, and then I'm just going to detach. And I'm holding the turkey in an awkward position so that way you can see it. Normally I just have the legs facing directly towards me. But you're basically going to just cut the skin right between the breast and the leg and thigh portion. And then you're going to bend the legs backward just like this, so that way the top thigh bone pops out of socket, which you can see here. To finish removing the legs, simply cut up the backbone. And then once you get to the socket, you want to press your knife down into that socket and just pull the leg backwards. And that's going to strip off that last little top part of meat and give you the best yield. But basically, once that top thigh bone is popped out of the hip socket, all you're doing is running your knife up along that backbone through that socket, and that's going to just remove that leg and thigh, making it really simple to detach. Now again, as you can see here, I'm pressing my knife flat into that socket and pulling it up, and you can see that I've removed the oyster with the turkey leg and thigh. And that's just a small step that's going to give you maximum yield. If you miss that little piece of meat socket, that's not a big deal. Now, one option that you have at this point is to leave the turkey breast on the breastbone by making a turkey crown for roasting. And the way you do that is you take your chef's knife and you cut down on the inside of the backbone. And once you get to this point where you're kind of hitting that neck bone, you want to stop, place your chef's knife down, and then pull that backbone outward. And it's going to pop that neck, just like that, out of joint. Now, at this point, the joints are disconnecting. You can go back with a smaller knife and just cut around. And that removes that large backbone, allowing the breast to lay more flat during the roasting process. So this piece here can now be brined, roasted, and because you're roasting it separate from the legs, you can focus on making sure that you get the best result possible because all you're worried about is the even cooking of the breast. However, I like to remove the breast and cook them without the bone because that way I can use the bone for my turkey stock, which I can use to make gravy ahead of time. So here I'm just going to run my knife, and here it's a utility knife. I'm just going to run it along the breastbone. The breastbone is slightly curved, but in basic butchery, all you have to worry about is just finding a seam and cutting through the seam, or finding a bone and cutting along the bone. So as long as your knife edge is angled towards the bone of the turkey breast, you're going to be able to scrape that breast meat away and remove it from the bone. Now here you have the large tender, which is on the underside of the breast. And this cooks at a separate rate than the breast meat does, and it also has a large tendon that runs through, which I'll show you how to remove in a second. So we're just going to remove that tender and set it aside. So again, here I'm just cutting along the side of the breastbone and flexing my knife or angling my knife edge towards the bone. So the first initial cut is 90 degrees down until you hit the rib cage. Now once you hit the rib cage, you can then start scraping the knife edge along that rib cage, just scraping down along that rib cage and peeling back the breast. And notice how I'm holding my knife here. I actually have it in a modified grip where my index finger is on the top, and this keeps my knuckles elevated and out of the way of the meat, but it also makes that knife blade an extension of my finger. So anywhere I point my index finger is where my knife blade is going to go. And this is my preferred grip when I'm fabricating meat. Again, I'm going to remove that tender and set it aside, and we're going to deal with that later. Any large pieces of excess skin could be trimmed off, and you can use those for your stock. Even though they add some fat to your stock, they will also add some flavor. Now, for the tenders themselves, you can see there's this big, long piece of silver skin that runs through that tender. So we want to get that out because it's going to be extremely chewy, and you're not going to be able to break it down during the cooking process. So I'm just going to lay it flat on my cutting board and use my knife to scrape along that tender. Now, the tender can be kind of slippery, so if you're having a hard time gripping it, you can simply just take a kitchen towel and pin it between the kitchen towel and the cutting board, and it's going to allow you to hang on to that tender or that tendon as you scrape it out of the tender. Now that we have the turkey broken down into its individual parts, we can treat them as the separate individual cuts that they are, which is going to give us the best end result. So instead of roasting the turkey as a whole object, we can take the leg and thighs, debone them, and make a roulade. We can take the breast and pan roast them, which is a high heat cooking method, perfect for tender cuts of meats. And we also have our turkey bones from this entire process that we can roast and make an amazing turkey stock to have available for us, not only to make Thanksgiving Day gravy with, but also to use in our turkey soup the day after Thanksgiving to utilize our leftovers. For more information and supporting video techniques, please refer to this episode's show notes at stellaculinary.com/CKS44.